word. Scenery. That's the word. Scenery. So when you come, if you have time to look at the book afterwards, you can see the end result that I had after about 5 or 6 years of construction. And many of the buildings that I have on the layout were handmade, as well as a lot of the equipment that I made, including that brass locomotive and the 2 other pieces I have. As well as that, I made many industrial buildings and cafes and hotels and many other kinds of structures to fill the space that I had. So to give you an idea of what I started out with, I wanted to keep this railroad in the family. So the first town was called Lauraville. That was the main layout. It had an engine house and it had a fueling depot in it. It had a town. It had sidings and a marshalling yard. That was where you made up your trains and broke them up when they come back from a run. And that was called Lauraville. Well, you traveled from Lauraville through a tunnel and out of sight until you got around to the far side of the layout, at the other side of the building. And you come to Thomasville. That was my son's name, Thomas. Thomasville led around an S curve, and it ran into the next town, which was called June Falls, which was my wife's name. June Falls was one of the major towns. It had a bakery and it had a printing plant. It had a meat packing plant, and it had churches and houses and a number of other cafes, and it was a real town site. And a number of sidings that led into these industries that were as part of the layout. From June Falls, it passed through Carroll Junction, around the bend and into Georgetown. And after Georgetown was on a siding, it was a branch line that ended up with a couple of sidings and some industrial buildings, hotels, and it was more of a small industrial town. It had a woodworking plant, it had a knitting mill, it had an oil business where they had oil tanks and fueling material. And as well as that, it had, what else did we have? Can't think of it right now. It's a long time ago. Anyhow, so from there, the branch line went through Georgetown and up the side of the wall, and it came to Donna Lake. Donna Lake was my son's wife's name, Donna. And from Donna, it ran off and ended up into the town of Elizabeth, and Elizabeth being my mother's name. The whole railroad had the name of Lauraville and Alfred Pass. And Alfred Pass was the layout portion that was out of sight. And Alfred happened to be my father's name. So we kept it in the family.
No Alec town?
No. It had, the only thing that Alec had on the layout was a diner in the town of June Falls. And we had Laura Lane knitting mills. Laura was my son's.
Laura was my mother.
No, Laura was her mother's, June's mother's name. And Lane was one of our son's daughter. So that was a concession to almost the whole family, one way or the other. Is there anything else you'd like to know?
Yes, there certainly is. When Alec described his locomotive that he made out of brass, it gives you the idea that he had very exceptional skills that few of us have, that he was a highly skilled machinist, and that is certainly true. But so Alec had, in his career, training as a draftsman, he had to draft and design and make special small fittings, and very, very skillful work required. And Alec, if you could just give a bit of an idea of the things that you made, the number of drawings that you estimate you made, then we'll turn to the paintings themselves after that, okay?
Working for a safety supply company, Safety Supply handled thousands of products, and among them were fire equipment and breathing equipment for firefighters, and they had oxygen equipment for the medical field, and they had they manufactured fire equipment, firefighter suits, fire helmets, and many types of gloves, and industrial clothing, and all types of safety equipment. My end of the business was involved in making many of the products some of the products, not many of them, but some. And it included grinder guards, which they use over a grinder in a shop to keep the sparks and the dust and dirt from going into an operator's eyes, as well as saw guards that they put on circular saws. And what else did we make? Well, all the fittings that I made were specialty items that were requested by companies in the field that needed special equipment to connect some of the equipment that was purchased, and some of the medical equipment that required brass fittings of some kind. As well as that, we made ladder feet for put on ladders, and these had to be machined and drilled out for a bolt to hold them. And many of these products had to be made with the help of jigs. So I had the problem of figuring out how to put a piece of equipment on something that would hold it so it could be drilled properly. And after I had served in the Air Force and gone overseas for about almost 2 years, stuck in Northern Ireland on a Sunderland flying boat squadron, when I came back home, we went back into the same job I had before. I started with the company on October the 3rd of 1939, just after the war began. And I ended up in 1986 on April the 3rd, and I had spent 47 years to the day at the company. If I'd gone one more day, I would have started on my 48th year. So that's how long I lasted. And many of the items that we sold, I had to go out in the field and service, and I installed saw guards on wood equipment, wood saws, and there were many mechanical things that were put on punch presses. One of them was called a Parsons guard, and this was a guard that was put on the punch press with cables attached to a man's hands, and the equipment that was attached to the press, when the ram of the machine came down, it pulled on a rod that activated a mechanism on the top of the machine, or the guard that was involved with it, and this in turn pulled a cable. The cable pulled a slide with two cords on it, and this in turn pulled the man's hands out of the die area so that he couldn't get injured with the machine closing to make the parts and pieces that were necessary in a punch press. As well as that, the company in the 50s took on a line of high-pressure air compressors from a company called Bauer, and they were from Munich in Germany. And the company sent me over to Munich in Germany for a training session to learn more about the equipment. I was involved in repairing this equipment when it was being handled by our company. If something went wrong with it, the machine was sent back to us. And if it wasn't, I traveled out to the various fire departments and industrial places that had this equipment installed in their premises. I was up at the Bruce Nuclear Station. Many times they had 2 or 3 of them up in that place, and I was in and out of that place a number of times to repair the ones that were on site. I went all over the country as far as Vancouver and Winnipeg, down east into the Gaspé, and I was into Halifax, Moncton, and I was traveling around the countryside with this equipment, repairing it on site, so I had quite a variety of places to go and work besides the shop that I had at Safety Supply. So that kept me busy, and I had a lot of traveling to do. Many places in Ontario I had to cover by my own car, and I went as far as Ottawa and New Liskeard, up in the mining communities, and what else?
Your art.
Okay, that was my life in Safety Supply, more or less. And soon after I got into this business, I decided that I could no longer. We moved out of our house, and I sold all the train equipment that I had. We moved into a 6-line condo up there by Munns Road. And when I got there, I had done some oil painting. And when I brought the paintings home, of course, they smelled up the apartment. My wife says, no more oil paints. So I had to do something different. So I went to acrylic paints. And this is what I did mostly with acrylic paintings. I have here a painting in progress. First of all, to make a painting, first of all, you have to draw it in pencil, so that any mistakes that you make can be rubbed out and corrected. So once you have done that, if you tried to paint over a pencil drawing, the pencil drawing would disappear once you got it wet. The pencil would dissolve into your paint, and you couldn't see what you're painting. So then after the painting is done in pencil and it's the way you want it, you go over it all over again with a permanent ink pen and a black line, so that when you paint over it, you can see the black line, which doesn't disappear into the paint. So that's sort of a 2-step process in order to get a painting started. And once you start, you take your background and get your background in. You paint in the sky. You paint in your background as much as you can, and then the last item on the board is the main item of the subject in session, and you concentrate on the train or the bird or whatever it is the main picture of the painting. So that's a sort of a 3-step method of doing an acrylic painting. Now this painting here is of an aircraft carrier that was operating during the Vietnam War in the U.S. Navy, and that's a copy of a painting that I saw in a book. And I thought that looks pretty good. It's colorful, and so I decided to do one for myself.
Did you take training?
I've never had an actual painting lesson. More or less self-taught. I had to do quite a bit of drafting. The parts and pieces and things that I had to machine and make on a lathe and grinders and machine shop equipment, I had to make a drawing of it in order to keep a record of what I was doing. So I had, as part of my work at the company I was with, I made drawings.